Well, Gary, it's good to be able to spend some time with you today.
It's great to spend some time with you as well,
Yeah,
Rob.
fantastic. So, before we get started, I get some professional questions to ask, but tell us a little bit about your background, your professional background, your family, and so forth, just so we can kind of get to know you a little better.
Sure. Well, my real passion is helping organizations and people grow and adapt to
Okay.
change. So, and I want to make sure that they get the kind of results that they're looking for.
Okay.
That's been kind of my basis for my professional career because it's been around consulting. And the consulting industry, of course, as you know, is one of those where you get to work with a variety of companies and with a variety of problems. And those are what excite me, is going from company to company and forming relationships with them and keeping them really long term. In terms of, I've worked with boutique firms, I've worked with large global consulting firms, and I've enjoyed all of those experiences because I've gained something from every one. So
Excellent.
it's been everything from Accenture and Deloitte to boutique firms, as well as lately, I had worked a couple of last 5 years with some West Coast firms that were focused on innovation and smart connected products around autonomous vehicles, robotics, things like that, smart connected products. So those were kind of some interesting things that I've been doing lately. In terms of family, we have 5 children that are grown,
Oh my.
thankfully, and all married, and so we're at 10 grandchildren right now,
Oh my.
and we will have 12 at the end of the year,
Oh my
hopefully.
goodness. 12.
So, and I'm sure there will be more to come.
Goodness gracious. Well, that's fantastic. So you have such a wealth of knowledge, and you've done so much work in consulting firms and help build cultures and all those kinds of things. Were you ever tempted to go run a company, a big manufacturing company or an industrial company or any of those?
Yeah, I was tempted to do that. One thing that I didn't mention earlier was that we did a startup consulting firm. So that was not exactly starting or working at a manufacturing company or anything
Right.
like that. But and I've worked a lot with companies, some of them for 20 years. So every month for 20 years, I worked with a real estate company. I worked with a global oil field service company and a healthcare company. So I wasn't a formal employee there or a formal executive, but I was a member of the team, shall we say.
Ah,
So yes, I was tempted, but it was always more fun to be able to go to a variety of companies and kind of see what else is out there.
excellent. Okay, good. Okay, so that's really, really interesting. So you could probably do it, but you just chose to be consultant so you'd have broader influence or
Yeah, I
more
really could.
variety
Yeah,
or
I really could do it. I think I really don't like routine things, and so I always viewed that as kind of being more in a routine,
uh-huh.
and consulting is not as much in a routine.
Okay. All right. So how do you stay fresh? How do you stay current in your profession? How do you um, make sure you're always on the leading edge?
Well, I read a lot, and interacting with a variety of people and networks is really energizing to me, and it's a great way to stay up with what's going on. So I love learning new things, and that's how I continue to educate myself because I'm a continual learner, and I just that's just real exciting. When I got into the smart connected products, I'd never really been involved in new products and technology and things like that. And so that was something that was totally new to me about 5 years ago, but it was something that fascinated me and was intriguing enough to make me want to kind of go that route.
Excellent. That's fantastic. So what drew you to Allen Austin? I mean, we've known each other for a while, but what drew you here?
Well, you kind of drew me here. We've known each other for 15 years plus, and we've
Right.
talked about working together for a variety of years. And so I think that was the mainstay. I've learned by being a part of some of the partner events over the years. I was a friend of the firm here, and so I got to learn a little bit more about what Allen Austin does, about the clients, about the way you do your work, and really about your values and the people that work here. And that was really intriguing to me, and it's always been appealing to me. It was just the timing was right in January that I was able to join and be a member of the team here. But I think it's been a wonderful experience, and the people is the real draw for me. The right culture, the right values, the right kinds of clients are important, and I think that's kind of the mainstay.
So that was actually going to be my next question. How have you found the experience now that you've been here for a half a year? How have you found the experience relative to what you expected or what your original vision was?
Well, since I'd known the firm, so to speak, for a number of years, there weren't really any surprises, which is great. I love to start something new and not have too many surprises. Most people that start new roles and new companies do find some surprises, but I think the whole idea of surprises here was kind of not as much of an issue. So I think that's been terrific. I love the collaboration. I love the teamwork. I've thoroughly enjoyed the team and the people and the leadership here as well.
Excellent. Well, we're certainly thrilled to have you, and
Well, thank
it's
you.
a lot of fun to work together, and it's just a real thrill to work with people, where your values are aligned and you're rowing in the same direction and all that. So, Gary, there are a zillion consulting firms out there. There are a zillion search firms, leadership advisory firms. There's lots of people who do interim work, a lot of people who do the kind of work that Allen Austin does. In your view, and you've been at some of them, you've been at Deloitte, you've been at Accenture, you've been at Fresh, and you've had your own.
Hmm.
You had your own firm at TBO. So, in your view, what is different about what we do here relative to all those other firms?
Well, I think the thing that really stands out for me is a real focus on strengths. That is refreshing and wonderful. Usually, companies try to say, "What are your strengths?" and then let's work on your weaknesses and try to improve your weaknesses. Here, we really focus on the strengths of people. And so we've done a variety of instruments that have helped us identify what our strengths are, and we play to those, which I think is powerful. There's really a real relationship focus here, which I appreciate and relish, because that's a real important aspect for me, because I like to form relationships and I like long-term relationships, as I mentioned before. I've had 20-year relationships with certain clients, and that's just energizing to me as well. So I think the whole entrepreneurial spirit here is terrific. There's a real process rigor here, especially around the search aspect of things. The search is a new aspect for me. Leadership advisory, of course, is a good fit for me with consulting.
Right.
My consulting background. Interim management is another aspect of things that I had not really done before, although we've played that role as consultants, but just not in a formal way.
Right.
But I think the whole idea of process rigor was really powerful, and it's a powerful difference between other firms. The retention rate for people that Allen Austin has placed is at 92 or 95% for the first 2 years, which is an incredible statistic. It's probably half that at the other firms, the big firms that are out there. So that's really important to me as well. That we're placing people and not just doing an assembly line and rotating people in and out of different roles and putting them into new roles and new companies.
Well said. So, in your view, what's the difference then between a transactional approach and a relationship purpose-driven approach? What does that mean to a client? I mean, what's the real difference?
Well, a transaction approach to me is let's look at the skills and the reputation of the potential candidates, and let's just put them into a slot. A relationship focus says to me, I want to understand the company, the culture, the fit, the style. What are the real performance dimensions that we're looking for in this candidate, in this role, and making sure that there's a real fit. Otherwise, you're not going to get that 92 to 95% retention rate after 2 years.
Right.
So that's a real critical aspect of things.
Yeah. So if this approach is as effective as we know it is, why do you think more firms don't do it that way?
Well, it takes a lot more time and a lot more effort. It takes a lot more skill, I think, to do the approach that we're talking about. I was surprised to hear about the reference checking that goes on. It's 30 minutes of reference checking of 6 different people for potential candidates, which is incredible. I mean, no one that I know does that. That is powerful, and it's a great way to really get to know the candidates that we're placing, the companies that we're placing them in, and making sure that, again, there is a good fit and that they're qualified as well as a good fit to be in those particular roles and those particular companies.
Yeah. So you think the firms that don't do it that way because it just takes too much time or too much effort or too much training or
All of those. I think it's a question of all of those. And it's a question of the business model. If you've got a business model which is let's do this quick and fast versus let's do this thoroughly and well,
so it sticks.
That's a very big aspect of a business model.
Gotcha.
So I think that's again a real powerful plus for what we do here, and I think it's a real draw for the candidates. I mean, we've talked to candidates and they've said even though they weren't selected for a particular role with a particular company, they've still received an enormous benefit by the introspection that we require for them to go through this process, the qualification process. And it's terrific. I mean, so if you can be a candidate, you're not selected, but you still have a great view of the retained search firm, that's the ultimate positive that I can think of.
Right. Well, we also have a lot of candidates say that they've learned a lot about themselves by going through that process.
Absolutely. And I think the companies have learned a lot about their culture.
Right.
That's been interesting too, because a lot of companies don't really know what their culture is, or they don't want to know what their real culture is. And so those are some other interesting aspects of things.
Yeah. So let's go back to your leadership advisory work and working with clients to help build great cultures. I really want to get your view on what's going on right now. So out there in the marketplace, of course we read the Houston Business Journal, we read the Wall Street Journal, we read Forbes, we read all these different publications, and it seems to me that a lot of people right now, a lot of companies are being pressured and are trying to become purpose-driven, as an example. They're trying to achieve diversity, equity, and inclusion in many cases. In some cases, they're trying to do stakeholder engagement. They're trying to engage their stakeholders better. What's your view of what companies are doing and what's working and what's not?
Well, I think a lot of companies are giving lip service to the whole idea of being purpose-driven, to being to focusing on stakeholders' experience as well as customer experience, etc. Because 70% of those kinds of initiatives fail, and they've been failing for as long as I can remember, 30 years or so. And I think it's because there's not a real active leadership component And that's going to be critical to making sure that that really works. If we look at real purpose-driven companies, we think of, gosh, Nike, Starbucks, Tesla,
Quick
Quick Trip. There are a variety of companies that are at the top of their game. They are the ones that are doing powerful results in terms of performance. That's really critical. There are other companies that are out there that are doing things, but they're not doing things well in these arenas.
So let's zero in on the for just a minute, if we can, on the diversity, equity, and inclusion. If I want to develop truly an inclusive culture, how do I do that? I mean, as you pointed out, 70% plus of these initiatives fail, whether
Right.
it's DE&I, whether it's stakeholder engagement, whether it's purpose-driven leadership, whatever. I mean, a lot of these things are kind of cyclical, you know. They come and go, and a lot of it's driven by, outside shareholder pressures, societal pressures, a lot of talk these days about ESG. So how do how would I do that in such a way that it would stick, that it would be real?
Well, I think it's going to be critical to make sure that there is a clear mindset initially, and making sure that that mindset is the basis for forming the culture change that's required. That's going to be integral to making this work. Mindset is kind of, when you think of athletes, they have to have a certain mindset. They can reach a certain physical performance peak, but until they have the right mindset, they're not going to be able to go beyond that. I mean, there've been a lot of golf tournaments lately, and all the golfers are extremely qualified physically, and they're all probably on par with each other. But it's a question of, on that particular day, on that particular course, with those particular climate situations and the audience that they have, are they able to perform at their peak performance? And I think that's going to be a critical aspect to get things going with culture.
Yeah.
In terms of if you're looking at DE&I, stakeholder inclusion, et cetera, customer experience, it's going to be important to have an awareness of what is your current situation. And we frequently use a variety of tools to help us understand where they are at a baseline, and then accepting that and going from there to actual actions, and making sure that everyone is accountable for that, and making sure that they're able to move forward with a critical few initiatives that are going to be meaningful to them. The thing that the organization really looks at is, what are the leaders doing? Not just what the leaders are saying, but what they're doing.
Right.
And that's critical, because executives have this magnified approach to the organization. Everything they do is magnified, and everyone tries to figure out what is meant by this particular statement or that particular action. And the organizations go into overdrive trying to figure those things out. And if everyone scrutinizes that, they need to make sure, the leaders need to make sure that they're doing things that the organization understands the why and not just the what. So the difference between management and leadership is, really, managers really talk about the what. What are we going to do? What do we need to do next?
Right.
And more prescriptive. The leaders really are the ones that are going to tell you why. Why do you need to do this? What's going to be the impact on you?
Yeah.
And what's important to do this for the organization and for you and the team?
So I have here a note that says something like the role of purpose, mission, vision, and values in any of these DE&I or stakeholder engagement or any of those transformational initiatives is huge. Do you agree with that? And if so, why?
Totally. Purpose is going to make you in the top 5% of your sector if you're really focused on purpose. And as we mentioned earlier, the Nikes, the Teslas, the Starbucks, et cetera, those are the ones that really are at the top of their game, and they're very purpose driven. They sell experiences, not just products. And if I know a lot of people that own Teslas, and it's almost a cult. I mean, it really is. They've got a great cult going there. Apple is another one that is doing a great job on being able to do that.
Right.
They sell an experience that gets its customers innovative hardware, software, and services that are unparalleled with anybody else, even though their products are probably similar to everyone else.
Yeah.
So, but the experience, I know all 5 of our kids, their spouses, and their kids all have Apple iPhones. And it's because that's what they sell. They sell the experience.
Yeah. Interesting. So this importance of purpose, does that explain why Justice Scalia and Justice Ginsburg, who could not have been any further apart ideologically, does that explain how they were able to love each other and why they became such close friends? Is that?
Well, I don't know them personally, but I would think it's really a respect and a common values, because values are what really bond us and what countries fight wars over. Values are really critical, and I think values are an important aspect to purpose.
Okay. So, in your view, well, let me just rephrase here. So, we're seeing right now an absolute avalanche, a rash of CEO search failures, where CEOs are being hired and they're just not working out. Herman Miller is an example. Land's End was a very recent and very public disaster. But we see it locally. We see it in private equity firms. We see searches fail over and over and over. And it looks almost like the same movie. What's your opinion on why that happens?
CEOs, the CEO role is a tough role. First off, they've got many stakeholders. They've got boards. They've got their own direct reports. They have customers. They have suppliers. They have a variety of. They have communities. They've got governance situations where they work with legislatures, etc. But typically, the boards that are hiring the CEOs don't necessarily consider culture and fit. They're looking for reputation. They're looking for skills, but they're not looking for all aspects of style, fit, culture, direction, strategy. I mean, all of the things that are really necessary for a CEO to fit. I mean, if we look at Land's End, they hired a lady from Dolce & Gabbana. They were trying to upgrade their image. They were trying to upgrade their style. And she immediately came in and did, $1,200 jackets and $600 cocktail something or others. I mean, it was really dramatic. And I think she lasted 17 months, something like that. Herman Miller, CEO, just left. Oh, I guess if they're still there, but that was a debacle in terms of the pity party that she talked about on a webinar that she conducted. That was really bad. CNN is in the news lately, and not to get into the politics of it, but they've gone through several CEOs lately. One of them was written up in the Atlantic. They had a 1-year review of, well, I guess the author of the Atlantic article followed the CEO for the first year. And that was this particular CEO moved the office from the main floor to a floor that no one could even find him. He was dramatically changing things, to where he was out of touch with the board. He was out of touch with stakeholders, and it was really, really tough. So I think it's interesting that Gartner just did a study a couple of months ago, and they were talking about what are the priorities of a CEO. And workforce, which usually is pretty low, was number 3 on the list.
Sure.
And it had gone up 32% in the last year. And a lot of that's probably due to COVID, et cetera. But workforce is really important for a CEO to be successful because they've got to be able to be in sync with an organization, and the organization has to support them. But if they make too many changes, or the changes really are not explained well, then the company is not going to be behind them. The board is not going to be behind them.
Right.
So they've sabotaged themselves, basically.
Yeah. So there's this, there's a guy that I like to quote. His name's Ram Charan. He's a famous Harvard professor. He's a board advisor. He's probably advised more successful boards on CEO succession than anybody else in the world. And he says that there are 4 things, to your point, 4 things that successful boards do in hiring new CEOs that unsuccessful boards don't. They get really clear about the culture fit. That's what you've talked about. They get really clear about performance expectations. What does the new CEO have to do to be successful, specifically? And not 75 things, 3 or 4 things.
Right.
And the 3rd and 4th thing they do is that they allow for imperfections, and they are flexible about where they come from. So that sounds like a pretty straightforward formula. It's certainly one that we follow here. Why is that, in your opinion, why is that such an elusive thing out there, and why is there this almost obsession with matching a job description, which is, a list of attributes based on background, experience, and credentials, and a resume? Why do you think that is?
It's harder, and it takes more time to do the things that you just described. Boards frequently take the easy way out. I mean, if some of these companies that we've talked about, like one of them had 5 CEOs in 12 years. I mean, when you're going through that many CEOs, there's clearly a problem there. And you would think that the board would change their approach or change the firm that they use to find these people, because this is clearly not working. And I know that there's a lot of turnover, especially right now in the marketplace. But luckily, the people that we've been able to place have found a home for themselves, and they're staying. But it's interesting that boards just really don't want to do the hard work of finding out more about the people that they're placing in these critical roles.
Yeah. So you've talked about mindset and the importance of mindset in terms of being able to lead effectively, cause positive change, lead transformational efforts. What kinds of things do you do in your practice to assess individual, group, mindset, cultural climate, whatever?
Yeah, we have a variety of tools that are really powerful. If I go back, when I started doing some culture transformations 30 years ago, a lot of it was pretty much manual. We had to, interview people. That was very time consuming, but it was very deep and it was rich. Now we've got so many survey instruments that are terrific. They can survey personal blueprints, they can survey leadership blueprints, cultural blueprints. All of these maybe take 15 to 20 minutes, and they give you knowledge of what's going on in an organization. It's very powerful, and it's relatively inexpensive to do that. The follow-up, of course, takes more time, but that's terrific. It gives everyone, the organization, the leaders, a chance to really understand what's going on in their organization. We're talking to one organization right now, and they've got 2,000 different locations.
Wow.
They've been growing by acquiring different locations, and they're keeping their autonomy of those different locations. But they want to make sure that they've got a culture of a common customer experience, which is important. And so I think that's going to be really a great experience for them, because they're going to understand their culture for the first time by going through and using some of these instruments, and making sure that the leaders really understand what's going on and are accountable for realizing that they were the ones that developed this culture the way it is. And then changing it will also be their responsibility.
Interesting. So this is the work you're doing with Michael O'Brien and...
Correct.
Okay. All right. So let's go, if you don't mind, I'd like to go back to the CEO thing for a little bit. Why is it that, in your opinion, why is it that these cultures, many times that are so powerful and so great, like Home Depot, Randall's back during the Bob Onstad era, why are those so perishable, and why do they tend to crumble pretty quickly if when the key leader leaves, and if they're replaced with somebody who doesn't, like a Bob Nardelli at Home Depot? Why are those so perishable?
They're perishable because the CEO is the one that develops and leads the culture. Everyone in the organization looks to him or her for direction, guidance. What are the unwritten rules of operating in this particular environment? And there might be certain words that are spoken, but if they're not acting accordingly, then instantly things change. Because it's very fragile.
Yeah.
It's very fragile, and it's based on, we talk about the difference between climate and culture. Climate is really around attitudes, and attitudes can change really relatively quickly. If you pay people, you do a pay raise or have some promotions or something, suddenly, the climate will improve. But that's not the culture. Culture really is based on values. And the values are those that really are ingrained in an organization. But it's the CEO that maintains those. And when the CEO changes and there's directional changes, that means that things will change. And they change rather rapidly.
Interesting. So I've been reading a lot of Carol Dweck's work lately. And she talks about this phenomenon and the fact that fixed mindset leaders often think that, leadership ability is fixed. People come with what they come with. And, that kind of mentality really embraces this idea of hiring the best and the brightest. The most highly educated, the brightest, people, because, whatever they bring is what they bring. Dr. Dweck, however, in her research, has discovered that mindset is really largely misguided, and that in actuality, people can learn. You can develop leaders. You can teach new skills. You can continually grow, both as a leader and as an organization. What's your view on any or all of that?
Absolutely, I think you can learn leadership skills. There is a certain level of fixed attitudes and development that you come to the job with, but through coaching and through other sources, I think you can easily change and improve and grow, which really it's more of a growth process than a change. Change is more binary. You either do it or you don't. Growth, though, is something that everyone should be able to do, and you can grow into a leadership role. So I think that's going to be really important. I think that's a mindset shift in the last 10 or 20 years. I think before, people thought in general leadership was you either had it or you didn't.
Right.
But I think now we're realizing, no, that's something that you can grow into and improve your leadership capabilities.
Yeah.
As we
Interesting. So, what about this work thrills you the most? I mean, what really gets you out of bed in the morning? What gets you excited?
I get excited about a lot of things. It's I think the main thing is meeting new people and talking about different opportunities is something that really always excites me. I love learning new things. Anything that's new out there, that's revolutionary, evolutionary, so to speak, that's something that excites me. We're pursuing a variety of opportunities right now. One of them is through University of Texas. We're talking to some of their some of their professors who are going to be helping us do some field studies with culture, and that's their life and their whole focus for their practice, if you will. So I think that's really exciting to me. And you mentioned Michael O'Brien earlier. I think working with him on culture is something that's really exciting to me because I'm learning some, quote, new things about that and making sure that we're using the best tools that are available. And I think some of the latest techniques as well that are really terrific.
Cool. So you guys brought Bill Higgs to town a couple of months ago.
We did.
Had a pretty nice crowd at the River Oaks Country Club. What was that about? I mean, why did you guys do that?
Well, he was the founder and former CEO of Mustang Engineering. He was a powerful leader and culture champion, and his values and our values really do mesh. And so I think he has talked with us about sharing his IP, working with us as a senior advisor. He's brought us into several clients already on some sales pursuits.
Nice.
So we're really excited to be working with him. I'm going to be talking to a CEO tomorrow who is a fan of his, and that's the reason why he wants to talk to us, is because we're affiliated with Bill Higgs. So I think knowing Bill and understanding him and getting to know him even better over the next few months and years will be really powerful.
Excellent. So you guys have this, in the leadership advisory practice, you work with this architecture called Total Performance Leadership and these 9 principles. In your opinion, what's the importance of measuring what matters? That's one of the principles. What does that mean to you, and why is it important?
Well, if you, whatever you measure determines what you focus on. And if you're measuring what matters and what really makes an impact, then that's what you should be doing. So I think that's going to be critical to making sure that organizations are truly successful in accomplishing what it is they're trying to accomplish.
Perfect. So you're an MBA.
Yes.
This is not to say anything disparaging about MBAs at all, but why do you think there is the such a prevalence of what Jim Collins calls a quantitative bias? You know, the tendency to measure only those things that have an immediate financial impact. P&Ls, balance sheets, cash statements of cash flow, statements of return on equity. Why is it that, in your opinion, so much of the world displays that quantitative bias?
Well, the stock market frequently promotes that. So I think that's something that companies and leaders naturally focus on because it's tangible. What I love about being able to starting to measure culture in a more quantitative way and other aspects that are considered softer, I think is a great way to be able to bring in a more balanced metric for an organization to be able to focus. So I think that's going to be something that over time, as we're better at doing that, I think organizations will learn that that's really important. There was a study that was done by Cotter even in the 90s, and they were looking at companies that had an adaptive culture versus an unadaptive culture. And the results were startling because over an 11-year period, the companies that had adaptive cultures were much more successful. They had a much higher ROI. They had much higher net income, much more growth than the non-adaptive cultures.
I see.
So I think ultimately companies and CEOs and others, MBAs if you will look at not just the quantitative financial results, but they'll look at other metrics that will equally help them manage or lead their organizations.
Well, it's been very insightful. So we're coming to the end of our hour together here in this podcast. Any questions of me? Any other comments you'd like to make? We certainly want to get all of your insights as much as we can.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to be a member of the team here. So I don't think I have any questions of you at this point, but I'm sure I will be visiting with you soon.
I'm sure you will. Okay. Well, thank you so much.